Hey guys, Zulk here. Welcome back to another episode of Messing Around with Zulk. We are doing yet another reaction video, reacting to more DnD content, reacting to more Arlentric, the best house rules for DnD. Now, I've been playing DnD for like 7 years, and while I'm not claiming to be an expert or anything like that, play however you want to play. But I am the type to stick closer to mechanics, and when I do heavily homebrew things, it's more like add-ons instead of rule changes. So let's see what these best house rules are and if I like them or not. Yeah?
You know what there isn't enough of in D&D? Effective rules for kissing your friends? No, I was talking about rules. I'm gonna see myself out. Well, hold on just a second, because I'm actually talking about fun, homebrewed ones that actually benefit the players and are even a little bit silly. Do you mean like drinking a health potion as a bonus action? Well, that's actually just a rule in the DMG now, but instead, as a homebrewed action, you could still use your action to consume a health potion, but in doing so, you gain the maximum amount of health. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious to hear more. Well, we might as well start off with the juicy stuff.
I am with the white shirt Arlentric because using an action to drink health potions and it always healing the max amount, that does sound good because like healing in D&D is already kind of meh. Like it's not like useless, but it's kind of the thing you want to do when someone is down at 0 HP or when you're not in combat. And it's not really, healing is not really the kind of thing you want to do mid combat, which is why bonus action healing word is such a good spell, because you can use it to get people up from 0 HP and then use your action to cast a cantrip. So it's really good. Let's see what else you've got. I like that one.
Talk about crits. Yeah, there's really no better feeling than rolling a nat 20. Instead of just doubling the dice, what if on a nat 20 you dealt maximum amount of damage with your weapon and got to roll again? I have to admit, that sounds even better. And if your DM was feeling extra spicy, you could borrow the exploding dice mechanic from game systems like Kids on Bikes, which would make combat even scarier. What do you mean by explosion? Well, let's say your weapon of choice deals a d8 worth of damage and you roll an 8. This dice explodes in a sense and allows you to roll again because you've dealt its maximum damage. And what about if that second roll was an 8? It just keeps on exploding. Okay, you well and truly have my attention. Well,
Yeah, I don't think doing that is a good idea. Correction. If you do that, limit it only to players. Do not let monsters do that. And because when you start getting to like CR, I want to say 5 or 6, monsters that do crit can wipe out the player in one hit. So adding on the max damage rule or the exploding dice rule is a recipe for disaster. Like, yeah, it will feel amazing as the player to do that, which is why I recommend, if you use that rule, make it a player exclusive. Do not give monsters access to exploding dice or the first weapon damage is max, because think about it this way, a lot of monsters starting at CR5 or CR6 will have like 3d6 damage. Imagine they crit. They can do 18 damage off rip and then roll again. And at level 5 or level 6, 18 damage plus another 3d6 plus strength, that is gonna end a player character. That has the potential to one-shot a player character. And how much H out? I just bit my tongue there. Ow, ow, ow. I just bit my tongue. But yeah, if you're a caster at level 6 with a constitution of 4, let me get my calculator real quick to see. So let's say you have a con mod of plus 2. So you have a 14 con. You are level 6. So that's 12 from con. And so 5. Let's say you're a full caster with 1d6 hit die. So that would be 5 times 4 plus 8 plus 12. Yeah, that's like 40 HP. Now, if you take like 18 damage, that's like almost half your health. And let's not forget, the monster is gonna roll again. So that's like what? 3.5 times 6. 3.5 times 3. 3.5 times 3. Let's say the monster has plus 3 to strength. So that's another 13.5 damage, rolling down to 13. So that's like 31 damage. You have 9 HP left. And that's like taking the average roll. If the monster gets a high roll on the damage dice as well, yeah, you're just going from full health to 0. And the thing about exploding dice is that if you have like so many dice you need to roll 3d6 or 4d6, one of them is likely to get at a full roll, so exploding off of that, yeah, that is also likely to one-shot a player character. Do not use exploding dice. Do not use max damage roll on a crit if you plan to give it to monsters. If you're limiting only to player characters, that is fine then.
While we're on the topic of other game systems, I feel there's a hell of a lot you can borrow from other systems that make some of the aspects of D&D less stale. And what defines something being stale? I personally find nothing quite as dull in D&D as the same player repeating the same skill check over and over again without any consequences. Game systems like Call of Cthulhu have amazing rules around reattempting skill checks. I'm slightly scared. Imagine, for example, your party's wizard is investigating a strange tome filled with weird cryptic symbols, and to investigate this they roll an arcana check but fail. But of course, they're not going to give up just that easy now, are they? Not before burning the entire building down. So they try again, but this time at disadvantage, despite the warning that there will be consequences if they fail again. And of course, they fail, perhaps mispronouncing an incantation in the tome, so they've now accidentally cast a curse on themselves that they have to now go cure. Okay, so high stakes, high reward kind of vibe. Exactly, because you've got to risk it to get the biscuit. Were these the silly rules you were alluding to? Oh, not at
Okay, so here's the thing, that's actually a good rule. That's, I think, a fun way to do it. The way I do it is tricking, the way I handle multiple players trying to do the same skill check over and over again is I just stick to rules as written. Rules as written, when you make a skill check, that is actually your best attempt. So no, when you fail, you cannot re-attempt the skill check. And if I have multiple players trying the same thing, usually with investigation or perception, I do it this way. I borrow this rule from Shadowrun. This is a homebrew ruling of how I do it in my games. Let's say you are a party of 4 players, and all 4 of them are searching a room. Instead of asking all 4 of them to roll perception, which I do sometimes, but that's actually a trick on my end. It's like, let's say I put a juicy secret in a room, like nothing that will end the session if they don't find it or do find it. But I just really want the players to find the hidden lore bit or a secret item or a secret treasure thingy in a room. I really want them to do that. In that case, I ask all of them to roll, because what this does is if 4 PCs are making the same perception check, someone is likely to roll high. That's just probability. So that's a trick I do if I really want them to find a treasure. Now there is a chance that all of them roll low, and in that case, well, sucks to suck, I guess. But yeah, that's just a trick I did. But on a more balanced thing, if you want more balanced, here's another way to do it. Instead of having all 4 players roll perception checks or investigation checks to search a room, instead have the players elect a leader. And And the leader is the only one that rolls the perception check. Now, since the other three are also checking the room, the leader gets a bonus +3 to their roll on top of whatever modifiers they would have. That's how I do it. I borrowed this, well, not exactly, because Shadowrun uses a completely different system of dice rolling. Shadowrun is D6 based and not a D6 20 based, but the concept is similar. And each additional person is adding a +1. This is something I use more when either there is one guy doing a stealth roll against a group of guards, or the vice versa, when they are sitting around and they are doing a perception check to detect a hidden assailant or something. Stuff like that. Or if I don't want them to get clued into something bad is about to happen, I sometimes just use players' passive perception and then add the +3 to it. Highest passive perception with additional +3. That's how I do skill checks. Continuing with the video.
Or we can rapid fire through some now if you like. Rapid fire? Because they're basic, every human NPC that a party encounters has a 30% chance of sharing the name of a human within the party. Okay, I actually love that. Turtles have to take their full movement speed to stand when knocked prone. That one actually makes a lot of sense. A new Dwarven feature called Drunken Durability, which grants them temporary hit points based on the amount of alcohol they've consumed, but once this wears off, they take all of this overloaded damage at once. I have to admit, it'd be a pretty gnarly way to go out. If you want to play as an Aarakocra and utilize the new Bastion features, yours takes the form of an oversized nest. Yeah, that thematically just makes a lot of sense. Or if you're playing as a Warforged and stand still for too long, you require an oil change or you'll suffer a movement penalty because your joints become so stiff. Okay, that's actually awesome. One of my favorites is halflings require double the amount of rations every day. Why? Isn't it obvious? Second breakfast. Ah, that makes a lot of sense. If you successfully retrieve and keep on your person a Harangon's foot, all of the skill checks are rolled at advantage. You sly dog, because it's a rabbit's lucky foot. A new racial feature for Dragonborns in which they're compelled to innately hoard valuable items, so whenever they walk past a shiny object, they have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw not to try and take it. And yep, that also checks out. And don't even get me started on tabaxis. If they see a moving light source in a dimly lit location, they have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw or follow it instinctively. Okay, that's just kind of cute. And they also have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw to resist the urge to destroy upholstered furniture. And that one's a little bit annoying. And the same goes for knocking objects off the edge of tables. Kinda getting the vibe that you had some pretty destructive cats. You have no idea.
Those are good rules, but they are fun roleplay. So, yeah.
Here's a curveball for you. Do you have any rules that make the D&D session feel more immersive? Care to be more specific? Well, I find in some of my playgroups, there's just no real incentive to bother role-playing or putting on a silly voice if you're comfortable doing so. So I wonder if there's any rules that can actually help and encourage players to do that. Well, first and foremost, your players definitely don't need to engage in the role-playing parts of D&D if they're not comfortable with it, but if you are wanting to encourage them and they're willing to try, a nice way of doing that is offering inspiration based on whoever does the coolest thing in or out of combat as their character, like a rogue performing a triple backflip after they've critted with a throwing star. I definitely give inspiration for that. Speaking of which, you could absolutely put the power back into your players' hands by allowing them to give out inspiration at the end of a session based on whoever did the coolest thing or had the coolest roleplay moment. But there is a much simpler option if you're really wanting to immerse your players. I'm listening. Just use Describe, the sponsor of this video. Now, I really hate to ruin the immersion, but I thought we could have a nice casual conversation about everything Describe has to offer. And trust me on this, there's a cartload full of awesome features in this bad boy. A note to editing me, put a car or something here to make it look like I'm at a car dealership. Describe is genuinely a DM's best friend. Do you need interactive battle maps or city maps because your players suddenly decide to join a traveling circus that you only introduced as a joke but they've decided to now follow it for the rest of the campaign? Then you're sorted. Perhaps instead you need some in-depth descriptions of locations, NPCs, monsters, or lines of dialogue because you're a bogan Australian and the only complicated word you know is juxtaposition and you say it so much but you don't know what it actually means. Again, you're sorted. Or best of all, sound effects, ambience, music. Describe's newest feature, Opus, has over 6,500 AI free of all of the above that you can use to match whatever scene you're going for. And when I say match, I literally mean if you provided some text, it'll give you
Wait,
the
AI?
audio, sounds, ambience, and music to go along with the words that you've written or that you've taken from Describe's other features. So, if you are interested in everything this bad boy has to offer, be sure to check out the link in my description. Well, I guess I did technically ask for that. Back to the actual rules though. Right, back to the subject at hand. A good one is whenever leveling up, re-rolling a hit dice if it's a 1, or better yet, not being able to roll lower than your constitution modifier. Yeah, it's always pretty disappointing when you roll a 1 after you level up, especially if you're meant to be the tank of the group. And if things are looking really dire, you could always sweet talk your DM into allowing you to re-roll 2s as well. I'd rather die than sweet talk him. And speaking of death saving throws.
About the HP thing, yeah, I don't like rolling for HP because when something as vital as HP, I'd rather just not risk it at all and take the fixed value. The fixed value, by the way, is half dice size rounded up. Actually, no, half dice size plus 1. That is it. So, like, if you have a D6 hit die, the fixed value is 4 per level up. Anyway, one way, if you insist on rolling though, one way you can have it if you don't mind really tanky characters is roll, and if you don't like what you get, you can instead take the fixed value or even the average value. Average value is like just half dice size. Average value rounded down, I should say, because then you get 0.5, but then you should truncate just half dice size. Like so, if you're a fighter, you have a 1d10 hit die. You roll. If you get lower than a 5, then you can take a 5. That's one way to ensure that you always have surplus HP. You know. But yeah, I personally would rather just take the fixed value. That's how I like to do it.
What about them? Well, rather than rolling them in front of your entire party, let me guess, the player has to roll behind the DM screen and try and keep it a secret? Even more devious, they roll it perhaps in a dice tower or somewhat blindfolded behind the DM screen and don't find out the outcome. So they literally don't know if they're about to die? Precisely, and you as the DM take photo evidence of these rolls or something along those lines, because I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're knocked unconscious, you're really not going to know how close to dying you are. Well, that's horrifying. Yeah, it's a teeny bit brutal, but optionally paired with this, you could always introduce a downed mechanic rather than being unconscious.
About that, I like the concept, but I feel like he overcomplicated it. Instead of doing all of that, just have the DM roll the death saves for them. Of course, the DM is going to roll in secret for maximum suspense. DM is just going to be like, hey, it's your turn. You're at 0 HP, so I'm rolling a death save for you. Rolls. Aha. DM notes down the number and does not tell the player or the other players. So yeah, that's a more simple way of doing what he suggested. All of the blindfolded dice tower shenanigans, roll behind the DM screen stuff, that is kind of overcomplicating it.
And what would this downed condition comprise of? It's the same premise as being unconscious. You still have to roll death saves every turn, but you can optionally intentionally fail a death save to perform an action that isn't a healing spell or crawl up to half your movement speed. So I could cast one last fireball. You could literally go out in a blaze of glory. It's beautiful. And to tie a nice bow on the death side of things, lingering injuries are always a fun thing to introduce after a failed death save. We have very different definitions of fun. Well, I think if you got hit with a literal sharpened broadsword several dozen times and almost bled to death, you would have some form of scar or ailment to show for it. I don't play D&D for realism, I play it as an excuse to kiss my friends. Good point. Well then, as a positive, adding an option to grapple as a reaction is always a good one. Well, that's fun. Because it's kind of just like, if somebody is actively trying to run away from me, I should be able to grab them and hold them in place to prevent them from doing so. Why isn't that an actual rule? And also, while we're on the topic of grappling...
Yeah, I thought that was an actual rule too. I thought that if you triggered attack of opportunity, you can swap it out for a grapple attempt. I've always thought that. I didn't know that wasn't an actual rule. Huh. Neat. And no, I don't have anything to say about the downed condition? Oh wait, I do. Because be careful with that when doing a high level D&D, because some subclasses actually give that as a subclass feature. So if you give the downed condition as like a general homebrew rule, it might take the wind out of sails of stuff like Zealot Barbarian. And is that Zealot Barbarian or Berserker Barbarian that does that? I think Zealot Barbarian. Yeah, Zealot Barbarian and Samurai Fighter.
Another sillier one to introduce is that if you successfully attempt to grapple a creature that is 2 or more sizes bigger than you, you're now just on for the ride. Grappling a Tarrasque, you say? And another rule that I think should just exist is that grappled or restrained creatures are unable to cast spells that have semantic requirements. Well, if you're adding that in, the same as to go for verbal requirements when you kiss someone, right? Right. Anyway, another silly one you could use, which really is a hard one to try and implement and mandate, but I think it'd be funny if doppelgangers, although looking exactly identical to their target, had really awful accents. How would that possibly... Oh, oui, it is I, your humble dwarf paladin. Really not your best work. That was literally my 12th take. Care to round this all off by rapid firing a few more? Happily. Another one that should already exist is having the requirement of a skill proficiency when offering the help action. That seems like a negative. Let me just paint you a picture. Imagine you are an experienced lockpicker who is attempting to lockpick a locked door, and me, a person who's worked as a chef their entire life, comes over and somehow offers you assistance. What do? Am I just standing over you being like, yeah, you're doing great, bud. Am I reading you a manual on lockpicking? How am I offering you assistance? Yeah, okay, I get the point. Moving right along, fumble tables are sometimes fun inclusions, but they do seem to disadvantage martial-based characters who can attack multiple times, so it's kind of hit or miss. And what would be in a fumble table? Things like self-inflicted wounds, breaking your weapon, hitting a nearby target instead, or pulling a muscle. Then with my rolling, I think I would have pulled every single muscle in my arm. And it's probably not as exciting as some of the other ones that we've talked about, but I think if you're mounting a creature, it should share your initiative order. So you're saying if I were to mount my friends, I really need to find a new play group.
Okay, so before I end off, one more thing about the crit fumble table. Yes, he is absolutely right. The problem with crit and fumble tables is that martials that make multiple attacks per turn are disproportionately affected by it than spellcasters, and it's kind of dumb because like a master level 20 fighter who attacks 4 times per second, and he's dropping his weapons, breaking his weapons, stabbing himself, stabbing his friends more or often than a noob who just learned how to wield a sword. So a level 1 fighter, and I actually have a fix for that. The fumble and crit tables will only be applied, and I do mean only be applied on the last roll or last attack roll of a turn. It doesn't matter how many times the martial crits or net ones on the turn. If it's not on the very last attack roll they made, it does not trigger the fumble or crit table. Personally, I have another confirmation check on top of that, but I think you can remove that entirely. But yeah, basically only let crits and net ones trigger on the last attack of the turn. If they crit before the turn though, if they crit on an attack before the last one though, it still crits as normal, just does not trigger the special crit table. So a martial who, let's say your champion fighter makes 4 attacks per turn, and they get crits back to back on the first 3 attacks but does not get a crit on the last attack. This will not trigger the crit table, but they will still roll double damage dice for the 3 crits they did roll. That's how that will work. That actually solves the issue of martials fumbling more and critting more than level 1 guys. So yeah, that's all I have to say. This was a fun video, and a lot of the rules were really fun. I will give it a like. go check out Arlentric himself. I left his video in the description below. I would prefer it if you checked it before watching this. I really did not plan this ahead very well. You should have watched his before watching mine. And since this came out a day ago, I think I'm going to hold off on posting this until like some time has passed, because I don't want to take away from his original video. But I don't know. It depends on if I remember or not. So guys, that's it for this video. If you like this video, be sure to leave a like, comment, and or subscribe. Dislike it if you hated it. I'll heart your comment to let you know I've read them. So just because I hearted your comment doesn't mean I agree with it or endorse it. I'm Zulk RS, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.